The HOA president stood in my driveway holding my disabled daughter's leash, smiling, while my daughter screamed for her missing service dog Bear. "Rules are rules," Diane said, stepping over my daughter's tears, unaware every camera on our street had already captured her lie. "I'm Sarah Whitfield, single mom to 8-year-old Lily, who has autism and epilepsy, and Bear, her seizure alert golden retriever, was her whole world." Our HO Maple Ridge Estates was run by Diane Cross, a woman who measured lawns with a ruler and mailbox angles with a protractor. Diane hated Bear from day one, calling him an eyesore, despite his official service vest and documented medical paperwork I'd already provided twice. Neighbors whispered Diane once forced an elderly widow to repaint her door 3 times because the shade was half a tone off. I ignored the whispers, believing paperwork and compassion would protect us. I was wrong about how far Diane's control would reach. One morning, a notice appeared on my door: unauthorized animal breed restriction violation. Bear, a golden retriever, apparently violated no such rule. I called Diane, explaining service animals are exempt from HOA pet policies under federal law, ADA protections, and our own bylaws. "I don't care what the government says," Diane snapped. "In my neighborhood, I decide what's allowed." Her voice was ice, not confusion. I filed the exemption paperwork again. Certified mail, tracking number, everything. Diane signed for it herself, then denied ever receiving it. 3 days later, Animal Control knocked on my door, saying they'd received a formal complaint about an aggressive, unregistered dog on my property. The officer looked confused when Bear greeted her calmly, tail wagging, wearing his labeled service vest with visible certification tags attached. "Someone filed this complaint personally, with photos," the officer said, showing me a picture of Bear taken from inside my own backyard. My stomach dropped. Only one person had ever stood at that exact angle, staring over my fence with a clipboard and a smirk. I confronted Diane at the mailboxes. She smiled sweetly and said, "I just care about community safety, Sarah. You should thank me." That night, Lily had a seizure. Bear alerted us seconds early, exactly as trained, saving her from hitting the hardwood floor headfirst. I posted about it in our community group, thanking Bear publicly, hoping compassion might finally soften Diane's relentless campaign against my daughter's dog. Instead, Diane commented publicly, "Service dogs don't cause seizure alerts. That's a myth people use to break pet rules." Dozens of neighbors reacted. I sent her Lily's neurologist's letter, confirming seizure alert training and documented medical necessity. Diane never responded, but the notices kept coming. A second letter arrived. Mandatory HOA hearing. My presence required. Subject listed only as repeated unauthorized animal violations, Whitfield residents. At the hearing, Diane presented blurry photos, claiming Bear lunged at a jogger, though no jogger, video, or witness statement ever surfaced. Board member Mr. Okafor asked to see the original complaint file. Diane suddenly remembered she'd left it at home. Unfortunately, conveniently, again. I noticed Diane's assistant, Priya, exchange a nervous glance with another board member. Something about that hearing felt rehearsed, staged, wrong. The board voted 3-2 to fine me $200 weekly until Bear was removed from the premises permanently. Diane smiled, victorious. I couldn't afford weekly fines on a nurse's salary, and I refused to abandon Lily's medical lifeline for petty neighborhood politics. I appealed to the county, only to learn Diane had quietly amended HOA bylaws 6 months earlier, buried inside 40 pages nobody read. The new clause banned dogs over 40 pounds for aesthetic uniformity. conveniently targeting Bear while exempting Diane's own 100-pound Great Dane. I mentioned that hypocrisy publicly. Diane's response was swift. My trash bins were suddenly cited for being 18 inches too visible. For 2 quiet weeks, nothing happened. No notices. No fines. No confrontations. I let myself believe Diane had finally moved on. Lily started sleeping better. Bear curled beside her bed each night, and our little house felt peaceful for the first time in months. I even ran into Diane at the grocery store. She nodded politely, almost warmly, and I foolishly thought the conflict had ended. That same week, a moving truck appeared 2 houses down, and a retired police detective named Mr. Reyes introduced himself, curious about Bear. Then, on a Tuesday morning, I found our backyard gate wide open and Bear gone, his leash still hooked to the fence post. I called the police, frantic, describing Bear's collar, his vest, his microchip number. Lily sobbed uncontrollably, rocking, asking where her best friend went. An officer found Bear 4 blocks away, disoriented, at an animal rehoming event, organized, ironically, by Diane's cousin's rescue nonprofit. Diane claimed a concerned citizen reported Bear wandering unsupervised, and she'd generously arranged his surrender before I could be fined again. I demanded footage from our security cameras, only to discover our gate camera had mysteriously malfunctioned the exact hour Bear disappeared. Mr. Reyes, our new neighbor, mentioned casually that his own doorbell camera faced directly toward my backyard gate, capturing everything, always recording. My hands shook as he offered to pull the footage, unprompted, simply because something about that woman never sat right with him. The footage showed Diane herself, in daylight, unlatching my gate, leash in hand, glancing nervously around before leading Bear away. She wasn't stealing a stray dog. She was orchestrating a kidnapping, dressed up in HOA paperwork and manufactured community concern. I filed a police report immediately, attaching time-stamped footage showing Diane's face, her car, and her direct involvement in Bear's disappearance. The rescue nonprofit, confronted by police, admitted Diane had falsely claimed to be Bear's legal owner, forging a fake surrender form. Diane's signature on that form matched exactly the signature from her fabricated aggressive dog complaint filed weeks earlier. Same handwriting, same lies. Word spread through the neighborhood fast. Suddenly, neighbors messaged me privately, sharing their own stories of Diane's manufactured complaints and forged documents. One woman revealed Diane had fined her for an unauthorized wheelchair ramp, despite it being federally protected, just like Bear's service status. Another neighbor admitted Diane once threatened to report his disabled veteran father's mobility scooter as unsightly equipment, violating aesthetic guidelines. The pattern became undeniable. Diane targeted disabled residents specifically, weaponizing HOA bylaws to erase anything that disrupted her image of perfect uniformity. I asked Priya, Diane's assistant, why she'd stayed silent through it all. She finally admitted Diane had threatened her job repeatedly. Priya handed me a folder. Months of internal emails proving Diane fabricated complaints, forged signatures, and pressured board members into silent compliance. One email revealed something shocking. Diane's own son used a service animal for PTSD, exempted quietly under an alias she'd hidden. She'd weaponized the exact protections she secretly relied on, denying other families the compassion she demanded for her own household. I scheduled an emergency HOA meeting, inviting Mr. Reyes, Priya, and every neighbor Diane had quietly bullied into silence over the years. Diane arrived confident, clipboard in hand, expecting another easy victory, completely unaware the entire board now held damning evidence against her. Let's discuss the Whitfield violation, Diane began, before Mr. Okafor interrupted, sliding a folder labeled Cross, Falsified Complaints, across the table. Diane's smile faltered slightly, but she recovered fast. I don't know what fabricated nonsense you're referencing, she said, voice tightening noticeably. Played Mr. Reyes' doorbell footage on the projector. Silent. Time-stamped. Undeniable. Diane herself opening my gate, leading Bear away deliberately. Gasps filled the room. Diane's face went pale, then red. Scrambling for an explanation nobody in that room was willing to accept. That's clearly manipulated, Diane insisted, though the footage's metadata, verified by police, matched perfectly with the exact hour Bear vanished. Priya stood up next, reading aloud Diane's own email admitting she'd forged the rehoming form to finally end the Whitfield problem permanently. The room went silent except for Lily's small voice from the doorway, asking, "Why did the mean lady take my bear?" Even board members loyal to Diane looked away, unable to meet her eyes after hearing a child's confused, heartbroken question aloud. Mr. Reyes, still holding his old detective badge, calmly stated he'd already forwarded copies to county animal welfare and the local police. Diane snapped, screaming that everyone was ungrateful, that she'd sacrificed everything maintaining standards nobody else cared enough to protect. You didn't protect standards, Priya said quietly. You protected your own ego and hurt a disabled child to do it. The board voted unanimously, immediately, to remove Diane as HOA president, effective that exact moment, stripping her of all authority instantly. Police arrived within the hour, informed by Mr. Reyes' formal statement, arresting Diane on charges of theft, forgery, and animal cruelty. I watched Diane, handcuffed, still insisting she'd done nothing wrong, her voice cracking as reality finally, undeniably, caught up with her. Bear was returned to us that same evening, exhausted, confused, but alive, immediately curling protectively around Lily on our living room floor. Diane faced formal charges, lost her HOA position permanently, and the rescue nonprofit lost its license for enabling her forged paperwork. The new HOA board unanimously rewrote bylaws, explicitly protecting service animals, disabled residents, and banning unilateral aesthetic fines without documented evidence. Bear still sleeps beside Lily every night, alert and steady, while our street finally feels like a neighborhood, not a battlefield.